Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we'll go on the record on case CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Vallow, continuing jury trial today. Advise I believe all the jurors are here and present today, and all have completed their juror affirmations. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Before we get started here, I will remind everyone there's a courtroom conduct order in place for both here and the remote viewing locations in Ada and Madison counties, and electronic devices are not allowed to be used to record, photograph, or transmit any sounds, images, or video from these proceedings in any of the locations. I appreciate the public's continued compliance with those conduct orders. At this time, the state is continuing with its case in chief, and I believe we're ready to bring the jurors in for further witness testimony. I'll note the state is here represented by counsel. The defense also is present, as well as the defendant. Is the state ready to proceed with trial this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks. Let's have the jurors brought in then.
Stand, please. Jury's all present and accounted for.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you all for your continued service. This time the state is prepared to call its next witness. Who's going to be examining the witness?
I will be, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Blake, you can call your next witness then.
The state will call Melanie Gibb.
Would you?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
All right, if you'd please follow the instructions of the bailiff to your witness seat there. All right, let me just instruct the witness here. When answering questions, please use verbal responses such as yes or no, because we're making a court record. Also, please try to avoid speaking at the same time as any attorney that's questioning you. I do have one other inquiry to make before you start your examination, Ms. Blake, of the witness. There have been, there's an exclusion of witnesses rule in effect at this time. Have you observed any of the trial testimony before coming here today? No. Okay, have you listened to any of the audio of any of the trial testimony posted? Was that no? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Blake, with that in mind, you can inquire of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Gibb, sometimes we've had a hard time picking up the witnesses, so the court reporter may instruct you or tell you if she's having a hard time hearing you, okay? Would you please state your name for the record?
Melanie Gibb.
Ms. Gibb, do you know an individual named Lori Vallow?
Yes.
How do you know her?
I met her in Arizona at a church event,
Do you recall approximately when you met her?
October 2018.
And when you met her at that event, did the two of you end up forming a friendship?
Yes.
Do you know an individual named Chad Daybell?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
I met him at some of different events that I've been to.
Do you recall approximately when you would have met Mr. Daybell?
I think I met him maybe a year or two before I met Lori.
When you first met Mr. Daybell, did the two of you strike up a friendship at that time?
Just a casual introduction to each other.
After your first meeting with Mr. Daybell, did the two of you stay in contact?
Whenever we would see, it was very periodically. It was not like we communicated, as friends or anything. We just, if we engaged, seeing each other, we might say a few words to each other, but not a whole lot of contact.
And after you first met Lori, did the two of you continue communicating from that first meeting?
Yes.
Did you stay in constant contact or consistent contact?
Yes.
Have you ever met or did you ever meet an individual named Tylee Ryan?
Yes.
And where did you meet her?
I met her at Lori's house.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
I would say within a week or two after I met Lori.
Did you ever observe Lori and Tylee together?
Yes.
What were you able to observe about their interactions?
She seemed upset and frustrated with Lori pretty much most of the time.
So, and when you say she, you're referring to Tylee?
Tylee, correct.
Did there appear to be some tension in that relationship?
Yes,
Did you ever meet an individual named J.J. Vallow?
I did.
And,
Yes.
And where would you have met him, if you recall?
Same place, Lori's house.
Do you recall approximately when you would have met him?
Within a week or two after meeting her.
Did you have occasion to observe Lori and J.J.'s interactions with each other?
I did.
And what observations were you able to make of those interactions?
So sometimes I would watch her with him, and she was very affectionate and loving to him. I watched her sing a song to him as she was going to put him to bed. She seemed to care a lot about him. And other times, as I got to know her as time went on, he seemed to, frustrated, and so the connection, maybe wasn't as I didn't see them interacting as much the same way. She was distracted a lot, so I don't know how to explain it very well, but it was, she was just trying to help him, trying to settle down or whatever, but.
So, from your observations, J.J. and Lori appeared to interact more when you had first met J.J.
Correct.
And it seems like those interactions declined over time.
I would say a little bit, but.
And I think you indicated from your observations, Lori was busy with some other things or
Yeah, she's distracted a lot.
distracted. After first meeting Lori, we've talked about that you stayed in contact with her. How often would the two of you see each other?
Sometimes it was daily or several times a week in the beginning, just in the very beginning, yeah.
And when you say in the very beginning, do you recall approximately how long the two of you would interact that frequently?
I would say until January, and then when she started moving, then I didn't see her as much or talk to her as much.
And when you say January, do you recall what year that would have been?
2019.
Did you and Lori live fairly close to each other?
I would say within 25 minutes from each other.
And did the two of you talked about you'd get together. Mm-hmm. Did you also speak to her over the phone during those times?
Correct.
Did you also message with her, text message or otherwise?
Yes.
Ms. Gibb, I would instruct you again, if you could just wait until the question is completed before you answer, and I understand it can be nervous to be there. It's just easier for our court reporter if it's just a back and forth exchange, so thank you.
And you indicated, I think, that after she started moving, could you explain what was going on there?
So about January, she decided to leave, and I believe she first went to Alex's house, or maybe Hawaii. They kind of were near the same timing, so she decided to leave and stay with him, and then she went to Hawaii, and then eventually she went to Texas. So she went to three different places, and then she finally went back to Arizona at the very end as her stay that I knew her in Arizona.
Do you know, you indicated she'd traveled around starting in January. Do you recall when you say at the end, approximately when the end was that she ended up, what time period she was moving around?
So January, February, March, April, May, and then July. I know she was back when Charles was killed in July, so I knew she was back in Arizona by July. So all the way from January to July, she moved around several times.
And while she was moving around, did you stay in contact with her?
Yes.
Was that frequent contact? Do you recall approximately how often you'd speak with her or text with her?
It was inconsistent, but it was pretty frequent at the same time. So it wasn't like a consistent daily basis, but it was often.
And after meeting Lori, you indicated you met her in October of 2018. Did the two of you end up taking a trip to Utah?
Yes.
And who else went with you?
There were, I don't know, about 5 or 6 ladies. I can't recall their names right now.
And that's just
Yeah.
fine, just what you can
Yeah,
recall.
I can't recall their names.
So there were 5 or 6 ladies that went to Utah together.
Yes.
Where did you go in Utah?
We went to St. George, Utah.
And what were you headed there for? Was there a reason?
There was a conference there.
And do you recall if Chad Daybell was also at that conference?
He was.
Did you observe a meeting between Chad and Lori?
Yes.
Do you know, had they ever met before?
No.
Were you there when they first met?
I believe so. I was there with her the whole time.
Did they, how long was the conference that you were at?
It was the weekend, so it was like a Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday most people went home. So it was that weekend.
And do you recall if Chad Daybell was there for the entirety of the conference?
He was there Friday and Saturday.
Were you and Lori there Friday and Saturday as well?
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I mean, we were in the area till Sunday. We stayed at somebody's home. But the conference was Friday and Saturday. And it could have been a Sunday evening, but I can't recall that right now. But he was gone by, if I remember, he was gone by Sunday morning or Saturday night, something like that.
Were you able to observe Lori and Chad together throughout the time that they were both there?
Yes.
And what, if any, observations did you make of their interactions?
They were very friendly to each other, very interactive, talking a lot about some of their ideas and beliefs that they had at that time. And so they were, there was definitely attraction in the beginning, right from the beginning. So.
And did you specifically observe any of Lori's actions towards Chad or how her demeanor appeared?
She seemed very interested in him, like someone that would meet somebody they're attracted to. She seemed flattered by him and very enticed by the conversation and, flirty-like. I would say a little flirty-like as well.
And do you know what Chad Daybell did for a living?
He was an author and a publisher and also a sexton.
And had you ever read any of his books?
I have.
Do you know if Miss Vallow Daybell had read any of his books?
She had.
And do you know if she'd read those books prior to meeting him?
She only read, I think, just a few, but she hadn't read all of his books. And I don't know if she made the connections yet of who he was with the books. I'm not sure about that.
And you indicated that you saw them speaking and they appeared to have some shared interests,
Correct.
and specifically with some religion, some religious talk.
Correct.
Do you recall if they told you anything regarding the two of them?
Yes.
And what was that?
He expressed to her that he believed that they had been married in multiple probations on this
I'm going to
planet.
object as to hearsay, Judge.
What's the response from the state?
Your Honor, it's the statement of a party opponent.
Not this opponent.
It's a statement of a co-conspirator.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection under Rule 801D2E that does allow statements of co-conspirators in furtherance of evidence of a conspiracy. That's how that's allowed, Ms. Blake. I would indicate, though, that I think there may be some additional foundation before getting further into this issue as to whether those statements are allowed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Gibb, did you have conversations about their first meeting with Chad Daybell?
Have conversations with him? I'm sorry, I'm not
Yes.
understanding.
Did you ever speak to Chad about the first time he met Lori?
most likely. I just don't remember that exact moment.
So after the first meeting, did you speak to Lori about her meeting Chad?
Correct. Yes.
And when you were speaking with Lori, what, if anything, did she indicate to you that she and Chad had talked about with regard to the two of them?
She shared with me that he told her that they had been married in another time period.
And did she tell you what she believed with regard to that?
She did believe that. She had already had the belief system that this multiple lives, as they would call it, she'd already believed that before she physically met him.
And backing up a little bit to that, how had Miss Vallow Daybell ever told you anything regarding her beliefs about a prior probation or multiple creations?
She wasn't quite clear in her understanding at that point. She felt, and she shared with me, that she had been married to a prophet from the Book of Mormon named Moroni.
And did she share this information with you before she ever met Chad Daybell?
Yes.
After that conference, did you end up staying in contact with Chad Daybell?
Yes, I talked to him, communicated somehow, very periodically, not very often.
And I think you already indicated you and Lori would communicate quite frequently after that.
Correct.
Do you know if Lori and Chad stayed in touch after that conference?
Yes, they did.
And how do you know that?
She would tell me that they talked and how often they talked, and I often saw her on the phone talking to him. Occasionally I could hear his voice, but she'd always indicate to me she was speaking to him.
When they first met, do you know if Lori was married?
Yes.
And who was she married to?
Charles Vallow.
Do you know if Chad was married?
Yes.
And who was he married to?
Tammy Daybell.
Do you know if their spouses were still alive?
They were.
And we touched a little bit on the idea of multiple probations.
Correct.
When did you first learn of that term?
Probably when I started interacting with Lori is when it really began to be introduced to me.
And who started to introduce that to you?
Lori, and then Chad, but mostly through Lori, through Chad. He would explain it a lot more than she knew of it.
So, would Lori tell you that she and Chad talked about the multiple probations?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of what Lori and Chad believed regarding multiple probations?
Their definitions changed the longer they knew each other, but in the beginning it was believed that in this earth you could come back multiple times. So you may live in a certain earlier time in the world and then several times depending on you as a person. It would be different for everybody.
After Chad and Lori met in October of 2018, do you know the next time they saw each other in person?
I believe it was 2 weekends later. He came to town for another event that was in Arizona.
Did you attend that event?
I did.
Were both Lori and Chad present?
They were.
Do you recall if there was another get-together held separate from the event?
Yes, at Lori's house, there was like a little meeting right before the conference.
And do you recall where that meeting took place?
At Lori's house.
Did you observe Lori and Chad together during that meeting?
I don't think he was there. I'm not remembering that. He could have been, but I don't remember.
Did you observe Lori and Chad together during that weekend?
Yes.
And do you recall the context of where you observed them together?
So they were at the conference, and I saw them interacting. And then whatever time he arrived at her house, and he ended up staying at her house.
So your understanding was Chad stayed at Lori's house in Arizona?
That's right.
Do you know if Charles was present during that?
I believe he was out of town.
Do you know if Charles and Lori were still married at that point?
They were.
Do you know if Chad was still married at that point?
Yes, he was.
Do you recall Lori telling you anything in November regarding she and Chad's relationship?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me that they had been married, I believe, 4 or 5 times. And she would go into different details with me about who she was, what character she was, and what character he was.
Do you recall if she said anything to you about going to the temple?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding going to the temple?
She would tell me that, yes, that weekend that he came to Arizona, that they met in the temple together, and they were somewhere in there, like in just like maybe a waiting area room, that they were sealed together by, I believe Moroni was there, and possibly, I believe she said Jesus Christ, and that relationship they had multiple lives, it was kind of like a reunited again. They got to be sealed there. It wasn't in a sealing room officially done by the church or anything like that.
And can you explain a little bit about the relevance of being sealed?
The teachings of our church talk about when you're sealed to a companion on this earth, that you are sealed for time and all eternity.
And when you say the teachings of our church, are you comfortable sharing what church you're a member of?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Did Lori share with you how she felt towards Chad at that point?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me, they very much loved each other. They loved each other, in previous mortal probations. There was a lot of affectionate feelings she had for him.
Did she indicate to you anything about whether or not they were going to be open about their feelings for each other?
She just shared how they felt with me. She was open with it with me.
Do you know if they were sharing this information with other people?
Just probably people in their small group of circle. I wouldn't think anybody else.
Outside of multiple probations, did Chad let me back up. Did Lori ever indicate anything about having a special mission here on Earth?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
She felt that she was part of the 144,000, and then as she developed her relationship with Chad, she felt like they were the head leaders of it.
And when you talk about the 144,000, can you explain a little bit about what that would mean?
It's reference from Scripture and the Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants about a group of 144,000 that would be here during the return of our Savior, and they would help do a great missionary work throughout the world, and they would have, a lot of a spiritual endowment from on high.
So if someone were to be the head of that 144,000, would that be a pretty high calling?
Absolutely.
Would that be a position of pretty significant power?
Yes.
And when you talk about they may have shared this with their inner circle or their close friends, do you know who that would have included for them?
Yes. It would have included Sulema Pastenis, Serena Sharp, Christina Atwood, Nicole, forgot her last name, Melanie, Pulowski, and I believe she told her sister later on, and I don't know how much she shared with her family. I believe that's, and Alex, I don't believe, well, let's see. Those are the main people.
And when you say Alex, Alex who?
Alex Cox, her brother, Lori's brother.
Do you recall approximately when Lori started talking about being part of the 144,000 or the head of the 144,000?
Right when I met her.
And then I think so. And I guess I should break this down. I kind of ask a compound question there. So she first starts talking about being part of the 144,000 when you first meet her. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And then I think you'd already indicated after she met Chad, she indicated that she and Chad were the heads of the 144,000 or the leaders.
Correct.
Do you recall approximately how long after meeting Chad she started telling you that?
Within weeks, probably.
Do you recall Lori ever telling you about a light and dark scale?
Yes.
Did she ever explain to you what the light and dark scale was?
She did.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
She told me that people that were light were people that before they came to this planet, when we lived in a premortal realm, basically our spirits lived there before we physically came here, that those that signed contracts and made agreements with the Savior were light, and those that were dark were those that signed contracts with Satan.
Do you recall when she first started telling you about light and dark, the light and dark scale?
It was sometime after she met Chad, that few weeks, when she met him. I would say probably pretty immediate. It feels like it was like it could have been possibly that weekend or just days after that, after she met him.
And when she would tell you these things, would she also essentially be teaching you about this?
Correct.
Did you observe her teaching any other people these things?
Yes.
And do you recall who else you observed her teach these things to?
I saw her teach them to the girls that I mentioned earlier, her brother, and just a few other friends that I did a podcast with.
Did the teachings about light and dark evolve over time?
They did.
What else did Lori end up telling you regarding someone that was dark?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
What else did Lori tell you regarding someone that was dark?
At first it was, they were working under the contract of Satan, and so they were more on that dark side, and then it would change, often more and more, but
could someone switch from being light to dark or dark to light?
I believe so. I believe that's my memory, yes.
And just backing up a little bit, when we talk about that inner circle, do you recall if Brandon Boudreau was part of that circle?
Do you mean like sharing the beliefs with?
Yes.
Or no, we didn't share. She didn't share, or Chad didn't share with him any of that information that I know of. I mean, she could have, but I don't remember it.
Do you recall Brandon ever being at any meetings or gatherings where you were there?
I don't recall that.
Did you ever talk to Brandon about anything Lori was telling you?
No, not during my friendship with Lori, no.
What about Charles Vallow? Was he present for any of the teachings or the gatherings or the meetings?
No.
Do you believe that Lori would have considered him part of an inner circle?
No.
Did Lori ever tell you anything with regard to an individual being possessed?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
So my first experience with her sharing that with me was, I recall she was in, I believe it was the second house that I met her in. So it was probably, that January time of 2019. And she first started telling me she was in the backyard of her house. She came in and she started sharing all the information she just heard from Chad. Chad let her know that Charles Vallow was taken over by an evil spirit, and that was the first time she had heard of it. And then, that made him dark, according to them.
And that was in January of 2019?
I believe that is correct.
Did Lori talk to you about a dream she had had?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding a dream she had around that time?
So she shared with me that Charles was getting ready to go to Texas, and I don't know if he was there already, but that she had saw him in a car accident. I believe JJ might have been with him in the car accident, but that he died in it. And so he would not be coming back home by January 1st.
And do you know if JJ was with Charles during that time?
He was.
And do you know if JJ would have been traveling back with Charles?
Yes, he was.
Do you know if Charles was in an accident at that time?
He was not.
Did you ever talk to Lori about the fact Charles was not in an accident?
Yes, I did.
What did she tell you regarding that?
I asked her what happened. You shared that you thought he was going to pass away. And she said he didn't because Satan interfered with the plan.
And when she talked about the plan, did she tell you whose plan it was?
She would talk about just from her own experiences. Often she would either have what she would call revelation about different experiences with Charles, or maybe she would also talk about her experiences with Chad and how they envisioned getting together, that their spouses would pass away, so that was the plan that was revealed to them. They believed that their spouses would pass away.
With the idea being that once their spouses passed away, they could be together?
Correct.
Based on what Lori was telling you, was it your understanding as well, because Charles was dark, he would need to pass away?
Correct.
Do you recall Lori ever talking to you about castings?
Yes.
What did she tell you regarding castings?
So she would say that she was trying to understand how to get these evil spirits out. And so her attempt to do that was to have like a prayer where she would, like you maybe would read from the scriptures, where you would try to encourage the spirit to come out by the power of God.
Did you ever participate in any castings or observe them?
Yes.
Do you recall when that would have been? Approximate, if you can remember.
Probably January, February 2019 is after, she learned that Charles was dark, so sometime after that.
And I apologize because you may have already said this, but was Charles the first individual that you ever heard Lori call dark?
Yes.
Do you recall where that casting would have taken place?
The first time I recall was at Sulema's house.
Do you recall who was present for that?
Lori, Sulema, Christina, Nicole, Serena, and me.
And those are some of the same individuals you'd previously mentioned, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And you talked about castings being kind of a prayer. Was there any other element to the castings?
I guess so. It was definitely out of context for what I would, see anybody talk about in a spiritual level in any religion, but they would use terminology that to me sounded kind of like energy work, and so they would try to share words like disconnect their cords, like a cord was something you connect your spirit to your body, something like that. They use different elements and words. I didn't use those type of words. I just talked about, my relationship with Christ, and so I don't recall exactly how everybody spoke those words, but it was their attempt to help convince the spirit to leave the body.
And so to back up a little bit, when we talk about to convince the spirit to leave the body, would that be the evil spirit or the presence that had come in, or would that be the actual individual spirit?
It would be the spirit that took over that particular person's body.
Do you recall what Lori told you regarding where the original spirit from that body was?
In the beginning, it was, they would be, I believe it was they were either in the spirit world or spirit prison. I can't remember in the beginning. That's where they would be stuck sometimes between this world and that world. It kind of changed a lot, so I'm sorry if I'm not real accurate, but it was either they were on the other side, that they had moved on in the spirit world, or either somehow they were stuck or something like that.
And you're just fine. I'm just asking for what you recall.
Okay.
And I recognize it's been some time.
Yeah.
With regard, so what she told you, though, is the original spirit is out of the body.
Correct.
The physical body is still alive.
Correct.
And another entity or spirit is in that body.
Correct.
Do you recall what she told you regarding if the other spirit, the evil spirit, the entity is cast out of the body, what would happen to the body?
So the first time they thought they were able to cast out this first spirit that took over Charles's body, whose name was Ned. When that spirit left, so they weren't sure how it worked. And so after they believed Ned left, then they would see that Charles was still alive. And then they would come up with another idea that maybe another spirit, and then they come up with another name that spirit was the one that took over his body.
And when you say they would come up with, this wasn't something that you were told all at once then?
Oh, no.
So as time went on, teachings evolved?
Absolutely.
And you refer to when Ned leaves Charles' body, another entity or spirit comes in?
Correct.
Did they give that a name that you recall, or did Lori ever refer to that entity by any name?
Yes.
And what was that?
Then after Ned, it was Garrick, I believe. Garrett, maybe Garrett.
And then what happened with regard to Garrett?
Then he supposedly was cast out. And then after that, another one, if I think it's the final one, was something like he blows, something like that.
And I think you said you participated in a few castings. Did you participate in any other castings regarding Charles?
Yeah, there was several with Charles, yes.
Were those castings done as new spirits would come in?
Yes.
Do you recall if Lori indicated whether or not the original spirit could ever come back into the body?
No, I don't recall that.
Do you recall if they told you anything, do you recall if Lori ever used the term zombie?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when she used that term?
It wasn't in the beginning, but I would say weeks after the original idea that someone taken over the body, they just started using that terminology. I would just say weeks after that.
And with that, you talked about participating in several castings on Charles. We
Yes.
talked about who was at the first one. Do you recall if it was the same individuals at the next casting?
There could have been not different people generally, but just maybe less of the group. I know that there was another lady, but I don't even remember her name anymore, but I think she was there very shortly.
Do you recall if Lori was present for all of the castings you were at?
Yeah. Yes.
And was she present?
Yes.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you recall if Chad was present at any of the castings?
I can recall one. It could have been more, but I can recall one.
And the one that you recalled Chad at, was that a casting for Charles?
Charles had already passed away. It was right after his death.
Do you recall who else you did castings for or participated in castings?
I'm not quite sure. It feels like it could have been Brandon Boudreaux, but that's what I can remember.
Do you recall if Lori ever told you that Brandon Boudreaux was dark?
Yes.
Do you recall if she ever told you whether or not he had an evil spirit in him?
Yes.
And did she indicate that he did have an evil spirit?
She did.
Do you recall if Lori told you anything else about Brandon Boudreaux?
Yes, so it evolved. So he was, I believe he was dark from the beginning. I could be wrong on that, but that's my recollection. And then he became a very high level dark. So the darkness kind of evolved into, like, they had multiple lives as well. And he was supposedly part of Hitler's group during that regime. So he just kind of it just evolved like that.
Do you recall if you participated in castings for any other individuals?
I don't recall.
And I think you indicated the casting that Chad participated at would have been after Charles' passing.
Yes.
So to the best of your recollection, would that have been the one for Brandon Boudreaux?
That's what my recollection is.
And outside of the castings, were you ever told that anyone else was dark?
Yes.
Do you recall who else you were told was dark?
So it was Charles. That was Brandon. Her brother, not Alex, but another brother of hers. Eventually her dad. And then Tylee, then Kay, then at the very end, JJ. And just random people that I can't recall, but those are the ones that I'm recalling at this moment.
Do you recall if you were ever told anything by Lori about Tammy's, whether she was light or dark?
If she was considered dark, it was right before she passed, so.
Were you ever told, with regard to Tylee being dark, did Lori ever tell you whether or not an evil spirit had entered Tylee?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
It was sometime between probably February or March to June, somewhere. I believe when she was in Texas, maybe she shared with me when she was in Texas, which you probably can recall better when she was in Texas than I can, but it's probably like in May or April, whenever she was there. That's what it feels like. That's what it was.
Do you recall approximately when, well, actually, let me back up. Did she ever tell you if JJ was taken over or possessed by an evil spirit?
Yes, she did.
And do you recall approximately when that would have been?
Was it September 2019? Is that when I was? Yeah, September. September.
In 2019?
Yeah.
And was that the first time you'd heard of JJ being possessed?
Yes.
And you'd mentioned that there was a casting done after Charles had passed away. Do you know when Charles passed away?
I believe it was July 11th, 2019.
And you indicated previously, I believe, that Lori had talked about how both Charles and Tammy were supposed to pass away.
Correct.
Do you know what she told you regarding Tammy passing away?
She learned from Chad that he knew years ago that she would be passing away, early in her life.
I believe you already testified that Lori had moved back to Arizona before Charles passed away.
Correct.
Were you in contact with Lori when she came back to Arizona?
Yes,
Did you, in fact, stay at her house in July of 2019?
I did.
Do you recall what day you stayed at her house?
It was, I believe, the 10th or the night. Spend the night and night 10th, something like that.
Around the 9th or 10th?
Yeah.
At some point, were you going to stay there longer?
No, I just periodically stayed with her, but I didn't have a agenda or anything.
After you had left, do you know if anyone else ended up staying the night at her residence?
Yes, I was told Alex was coming the next morning or the next day.
Do you know if that would have been the night before Charles died?
Right, correct.
Did Lori tell you why she was going to have Alex stay there?
She told me that he needed to stay there to protect her because Charles was going to kill her.
Did Lori ever tell you how Charles died?
She did.
What did she tell you?
She told me that when he came into the house, he was argumentative with her. She had JJ in the car. She had his cell phone. She told me his cell phone was in the car that JJ was in, and that she said that the spirit told her to pick up the phone and grab it. She ran into the house, and he was really angry that he took her phone, and they were yelling and screaming. He was threatening her, she told me. Then Tylee came out with a baseball bat. She told me to protect herself or her mom, or felt the need to protect them, and that it got heated, the conversation. Then Alex interacted with him, and it became very argumentative. He said that he went to get his gun to protect them, and then he shot him.
And when you say he shot him, who shot Charles?
Alex.
Did Lori tell you whether or not she witnessed the shooting?
I don't think so.
Did she indicate that she was present for the altercation?
Yes.
Do you recall if Chad Daybell ended up visiting sometime after Charles' death?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
I would say within a week or two. I don't recall the time or day.
Did you observe Chad and Lori together when he visited after Charles' death?
Yes.
Were you able to make any observations as to how Chad seemed?
They both seem very happy.
And when you say they both, was that Chad and Lori?
Correct.
And when we talk, you talked about she took his phone. Are you referring to, who is the she?
Lori said she grabbed his
And when you
Charles's
say,
cell phone.
did Lori tell you where Tylee was during the shooting?
I just know she was around. I don't recall her expressing. She could have. I can't recall it right now. Who was present? I just know Alex was.
Do you recall if she told you where JJ was during the shooting?
My memory seems to be either he was in the car or I know at some point she took him somewhere, but that might have been afterwards. I just don't recall right now.
Did anyone make any indication to you regarding feelings of Charles being dead?
No, I mean, you mean like sad feelings or?
Yeah, any indication of feeling sad?
The appearance was not sad.
Did anyone indicate being happy or relieved that Charles was deceased?
There was a portray of happiness and excitement. Yeah.
Prior to Charles' passing, do you know if Chad and Lori had stayed in contact with each other?
Yes.
Do you know how frequently they would communicate?
Multiple times a day. That is my understanding.
Did you ever observe Lori with more than one cell phone?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many cell phones you had seen her with?
At least 2, maybe 3.
Did she ever tell you what she used those phones for?
She had one phone just for Chad and then her regular cell phone, and I can't remember. Seemed like she got another one.
Did Lori ever tell you whether or not she and Chad would meet up? Would ever meet while Charles was still alive?
Yes.
Did she tell you where they would meet?
One time she said they, after visiting her, or right after I visited her in Texas, she was to meet with him. And I believe they were in a hotel, according to my memory, and they were to go to temples together. That's what she said. There was another time she left town, but she indicated she went to Salt Lake, but my guess is she didn't. I don't know. She indicated she went to Salt Lake, so I don't know if they met up there or what happened there. She didn't tell me if they got together there, but.
I'm going to object, move to strike. It looks like this is speculation. She doesn't know what Lori did.
I will sustain that objection, so I'll instruct the jurors to please don't consider that previous response as to the speculative answer.
Did Lori ever tell you directly that she and Chad would meet at hotels or motels?
Yes.
And did they actually meet did she tell you that they met at hotels?
Yes.
Did she tell you that they would meet at motels?
I don't remember the wording exactly.
One of the two.
Yeah, right.
Did Lori ever indicate to you whether or not she and Chad were engaged in an affair?
She would just share that they were intimate.
Was this while Charles was still alive?
Yes.
Was this while Tammy was still alive?
Yes.
Did Lori indicate whether or not she thought it was okay that they were engaging in intimate relations?
She did. She felt it was according to God's will.
And did she tell you, ever expand on why she believed it was according to God's will?
Yes. She explained that because they had been married in multiple lives and they had a mission together, that it was okay.
And when we talk about her having a mission, did she ever talk to you about her mission to lead the 144,000 in relation to her children?
She indicated that she was a part of that group, the 144,000, and at some point everybody in her family would pass on just because of tribulations. At some point she shared that with me, probably in the very beginning.
Did Lori ever indicate any concerns to you about her ability to continue to care for JJ?
I believe, just right before he was killed, she just indicated he was difficult to handle, and so it was hard for her to do that and to be with Chad. So something in that communication like that.
Did she ever indicate a desire to quit caring for JJ or to get rid of him?
She did.
And what did she indicate to you?
She indicated that she was going to ask Kay if she could watch him from now on.
And going back a little bit, when was the last time that you saw Tylee?
Before they left to Idaho. So she left, I think, in October, September, August. I don't know, July or August, whenever, right before, probably they left to go up to Idaho.
And do you recall approximately when they left to go to Idaho?
Maybe August, beginning of August 2019.
And when you say they, do you know who went to Idaho?
Lori, Tylee, JJ, and
What?
Alex. Alex went up there too.
And when you say Alex went up there too, do you recall if he moved at the same time as Lori?
Around the same time. It seemed like he might have gotten there maybe a week. I know she went to visit to find an apartment. It seems like he might have been there a week or so before. I know it's just around the same time.
Once she left to Idaho, did you ever speak to Lori on the phone?
I did.
When you would talk to her on the phone, did you ever hear Tylee or JJ or speak to one of them?
I heard Tylee in the background.
Do you recall if that was close in time to their move?
They were already moved in their apartment in Idaho.
After seeing Tylee before they moved, did you ever see Tylee again?
No.
Did you ever travel to Idaho to where Lori was living?
I did.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
In September, the middle of the month.
And why did you travel up there?
A few reasons. She asked me to come up. Another reason is there was a seminar that I was interested in going to around not too far from her home. And also me and my boyfriend at the time were going to see his son as well when we were passing through.
When you came to Idaho, did you end up staying at Lori's residence?
I did.
Did David also stay at Lori's residence?
He did.
When you got there, did you see Tylee?
No,
Did you ask Lori where Tylee was?
I did.
What did Lori tell you?
She told me that she was at BYU and she'd moved her in with some female friends or people, at the dorms or somewhere at night, BYU campus.
Do you recall how long you were in Idaho?
I believe a Thursday to a Monday morning.
While you were there, did you ever see Tylee?
No,
Did you ever hear anyone speak to Tylee?
no,
Did Lori make any other reference to Tylee while you were there?
I asked about her belongings. They weren't in, I didn't see them. She said she put them in storage. She really didn't talk about her much.
Did you see JJ when you were there?
I did.
Did Lori talk to you about JJ while you were there?
She did.
What did she tell you about JJ?
When I first arrived, she let me know that she said that JJ had now had an evil spirit in him. She had learned it from the day before.
Did she indicate how she knew that he had an evil spirit?
She said that she always went to Chad about this information and he would share it with her when it would happen.
Did she indicate whether or not she'd made any observations regarding the behaviors of JJ?
She did.
And what did she tell you?
She would tell me his behavior was more difficult, and she would tell me his speech was more intelligent, and she would tell me he would say things like, "I love Satan." She told me he would, climb up on the refrigerator and go up top of the cabinets, and he was acting just more aggressive, more. She just tried to explain how she believed he was changing in more of a negative type of a demeanor, I guess.
Was this the first time that Lori had talked to you about someone changing once they were dark or possessed?
No.
And who else had she indicated had behavior or physical changes?
I remember Charles. She indicated he looked different. I just not remembering all the details, but she would say some things about their behaviors. She would share, like maybe they would just talk to her differently.
Do you recall approximately how many times before that interaction or that visit that you would have seen JJ?
I saw him a handful of times. I haven't tried to figure it out. Maybe 10 or 15 times in his life. I'm not sure.
Based on the times that you'd been able to observe him, did you notice any changes in JJ?
No.
Did he appear to be a typical 7-year-old?
A typical 7-year-old autistic kid.
And when you say a typical 7-year-old autistic kid, do you have experience with autistic children?
To some level.
And So you're aware, or you've observed some behaviors before.
Yes.
And JJ's behavior seemed consistent with any autistic 7-year-old
Yes.
that you've observed.
Yes.
Did you ever see JJ climbing on counters or the ceiling?
No.
While you were there, did you ever observe JJ act out?
He seemed very upset one day, and so Chad took him upstairs and went into a bedroom with him, according to Chad.
And you were there towards the mid to end of September, is that what you said?
So the day I left, I believe, was September 23rd, so the Thursday before that.
And Charles had passed away.
Correct.
Do you know if Tammy was still alive?
She was.
And you mentioned Chad being there.
Yes.
Was Chad there for the duration of your visit?
He would come in and out.
Do you know if he stayed the night while you were there?
No.
And I'll clarify that. No, you don't know, or no, he did not.
No, he did not.
So when JJ acted out, it was Chad, not Lori, that took him upstairs.
Correct.
And when Chad came, did Chad come back down from taking him upstairs?
He did.
Was JJ with him?
I think so.
What did Chad say regarding that?
He just quietly came down, and I asked him why his neck was so red, and he said that JJ had scratched his neck.
Did you have occasion to observe Chad and Lori during that visit?
I did.
Did you observe their interactions with each other?
I did.
What did you observe?
They're affectionate. He consoled her. He would kiss her on the cheek, hug her. And they had, fun together, singing and dancing too.
Did they appear fairly affectionate?
Yes.
Do you recall going to walk a track with them?
I do.
And what, if anything, did you observe when you went to do that?
Walked around the track with them, and then we went downstairs, and they showed me some beautiful pictures in one of the hallways at the campus. And then at the end, as we got in the car, Lori and I got in her car, and then he got in his car. They were affectionate. He hugged her and gave her a kiss.
Do you recall if you were told anything regarding the secrecy of Chad and Lori's relationship?
Yes.
And what were you told?
Chad had indicated to David that weekend that, he'd appreciate if he didn't share it with anybody about their relationship. He probably talked about it like that, but I can recall that moment.
And were you present for that conversation?
Yes.
During that conversation, did you indicate that was a conversation mainly between Chad and David?
Yes.
Did you overhear Chad say anything else regarding Tammy?
He said that he was still married to her, and I wasn't paying attention to the whole conversation, and I don't recall the whole conversation. He could have talked about how she was a good wife. I can't remember if David told me that or she did, but anyway, that's what it feels like, he said.
Do you know, has Lori ever indicated to you if the date September 22nd has any kind of special meaning?
Yes.
And what has she indicated to you?
She indicated to me that that was the date that Moroni appeared to her in a temple.
Do you recall the last time you saw JJ?
I recall seeing him the Sunday night when he was being taken upstairs by Alex in his bedroom. That's the last time I recall seeing him.
And do you know what date that was?
I believe that was the 22nd.
Were you still there you left on that next month, or the following day, the Monday?
Correct.
Did you see JJ that next day?
I did not. I don't recall seeing him.
Did Lori say anything to you about JJ?
I don't remember her talking to me about him, other than she was talking about some of his behaviors and things like that.
Prior to Charles dying, did Lori ever talk to you at all about life insurance?
A little bit.
Do you recall what she told you?
Specifically, I remember we were in her kitchen after Charles passed. Right before he came to town. She told me, I said, why would he want to kill you? And she said, well, I have, I think she said $1 million or a few $1 million of insurance on her, that he wanted that. But then she said she found out that he had changed the policy and a lot of that money to his sister Kay.
So a lot of the money, if Lori died, would go to Kay, according to her. Sorry, maybe I got it confused. If Charles passed away, then the money would go to Kay. That's what I meant to say. And do you recall when she told you she had learned that?
It felt like that was the first time. I recall that being the first time we talked about it, the day before he was killed.
Did you ever talk to Lori about why she didn't just get a divorce?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She told me that was not the Lord's will for them to get a divorce because it seemed, especially when I asked about Chad getting divorced, it seemed that the Lord didn't want him to because he would be penalized for that.
And do you know what they meant, or did they ever explain to you what they would be penalized meant?
I recall her saying that he would lose his exaltations or his, something to that effect as his exaltations or his standing with God.
Did you ever see JJ again after the night of September 22nd?
I don't recall seeing him.
Did you ever return to visit Lori in Idaho after that visit?
No.
Did you stay in contact with Lori?
Yes.
Did you speak to her frequently, occasionally? Do you remember?
Occasionally.
What about Chad? Did you stay in contact with him?
Oh, yes. I mean, well, he contacted me, but I didn't contact him that I can recall.
Do you recall any specific times that Chad contacted you?
Yes. It seemed like it was a few days in November before Thanksgiving, and he called me when I was in Utah, and he told me that the Rexburg police would be calling to not answer the phone.
Did he expand on that as to why he didn't want you to answer the phone?
Well, I had to ask him a few questions.
And what did he tell you?
He said that that the police were questioning at Lori's apartment where JJ was. And then I asked him, I said, he's not with Kay? And he said, no, he's not. And he had a nervous voice, and I asked him if he was, and he said yes. And he told me that Lori would be contacting me shortly after that.
And you say you asked Chad if JJ was with Kay.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you ask him that?
Because that's what I was told. That's where he went. So why would Kay be looking for him if Kay had JJ?
Do you recall who told you that he was with Kay?
Lori did.
Did Lori tell you how she got JJ into Kay's custody?
She said they met at the airport, and they met together, and she asked her to watch JJ.
Do you recall approximately when Lori told you that?
I would say within a few weeks after I left. I don't recall.
And when you say after you left, are you referring to that September visit?
Correct.
Did Lori, in fact, reach out to you?
I believe it's possible I reached out to her and asked her.
What did Lori say to you?
She told me that she met up with Kay in the airport, and that she told her that she had cancer and that she needed for JJ to be watched. And she said, okay. And that was the gist of it.
And to the best of your understanding, Lori's indication was Kay had agreed to take JJ.
Correct.
And going forward to the date that Chad called and asked you not to speak with law enforcement, did Lori, in fact, reach out to you?
She did.
What did she say?
She said that the police had come by, and she told the police that I had JJ. She told me to go to she told the police that I took JJ to a movie called Frozen, I believe, and just take random pictures of kids running around at the movie theater.
Was JJ with you?
No,
Did law enforcement try to reach out to you?
they did.
Did you pick up or respond to them initially?
Not initially.
And why did you not respond to them initially?
I wasn't sure what in the world to do.
Had Lori told you anything previously regarding law enforcement?
I'm not sure at this point when she shared with me, but she told me that they were dark and that they were, after her, like Satan was after her with the other dark entities that they talked about. So they call them dark translated beings, I believe. But I don't know exactly when she shared that with me, but at some point she did.
Did she tell you anything about other people being after her?
Kay and her brother, her father, and I think.
And her brother, would that have been Alex
brother.
Cox?
No, her other brother. I forgot his name.
So when Chad's called and asked you not to speak to law enforcement, and then Lori's called you, you don't answer law enforcement right away because you're not sure what to do.
Right. She told me, I forgot to share this, she told me that JJ's life was in danger, that Kay was trying to kidnap him from her. That's what she shared with me.
And did you believe her?
I wasn't sure. I was more perplexed and probably in shock a bit.
Had you believed things Lori had shared with you before?
At times, yes.
Was she still a friend of yours at that point?
Yes.
When you initially made contact with law enforcement, or I should ask, did you eventually speak with law enforcement?
Yes, I ended up talking to Officer Pillar from Gilbert, Arizona.
And the first time you had contact with law enforcement, did you in fact indicate JJ was with you?
How I shared it with him is I said I had him, but then I didn't have him anymore, that Lori had him. That's how I kind of talked about it.
And had you ever had JJ with you?
No.
And why at that time did you relay that to law enforcement?
I wasn't 100% sure she was telling the truth or not, and I felt in a very weird and uncomfortable position, and I really did not know what to do. Regrettably, I didn't share exactly how I wanted to.
At some point, did you end up making contact with law enforcement at a later date?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
I feel like it was just the very beginning of December probably, or the very end of November, somewhere in that time.
At that time, did you tell law enforcement that JJ had never been with you?
Oh, yeah.
Did you share with them what you knew?
Yes.
And Judge, I'll indicate I'm getting close to the point of asking to admit an exhibit that's about a little over 20 minutes long. If that is admitted and published, I don't know if you'd like to take a mid-morning break now or continue through that.
Let's go ahead and go forward now and take the break. It's how long, 20 minutes?
A little over 20 minutes.
Okay, let's keep going at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb, did you share a recording with law enforcement at some point?
I did.
When was that recording made?
I believe sometime in December, the beginning of December.
Was it a recording of a conversation that you were party to?
Yes.
Who else is on that call?
Lori and Chad and myself.
Did you, in fact, make the recording?
I did.
And if you were to hear a portion of that recording, do you believe that you would be able to recognize that?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have what's marked as State's Exhibit 42. I would ask to be allowed to play a portion of that for identification purposes.
Any objection?
Your Honor, I'm not sure if we're just going to play a portion of it or the entire conversation. We'd rather that the court hear the entire conversation.
The portion was just simply to lay foundation, I think, for identification purposes.
If the defense will stipulate to the admission, I'm happy to play the full thing. It was just for identification purposes. I didn't know if we wanted her to identify it first.
I think we've all heard it. Well, both sides have heard it. If it's not what it purports to be, I'll certainly object right at the beginning.
Okay, and why don't we just get it started? You can pause it and lay that identification foundation. I'll confirm again whether or not the defense then objects to it being admitted. Thank you, counsel.
This is a recording on December 8th at 3:43 p.m. And I am calling Chad Daybell's phone number, and hopefully I will be talking to both of them, Chad and Lori. So here goes the phone call.
All right, Ms. Blake, can you pause it at that point? Thank you. So, again, to lay that foundation of identification, Mr. Thomas, you indicate you previously reviewed this exhibit. Do you have any concerns going forward that this is the correct exhibit you've previously reviewed?
No, Your Honor, this is the exhibit that we were anticipating.
All right. Is there any objection then? 42 needs to be admitted before published, so it's been moved to be admitted. Does the defense object to the admission of Exhibit 42?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. So, Ms. Blake, apologies for the interruption. You can publish this now.
And I will just make the record, so for defense and the court's benefit, I have that the total duration is going to be 21 minutes and 53 seconds.
Okay. Thank you,
Just
Ms.
so that comports with counsel's copy.
It does.
All right. It can be published at this time, and it is admitted.
Melanie.
Hi, Chad. Hey, Lori. Hi.
Melanie's not speaker.
Oh, okay.
Alright.
question, if you don't mind, Lori?
Yeah, of course.
I want to know, remember we talked about JJ going to Kay's house, and you told me he went there, and now he's not there? I was wondering what happened.
Well, I had to move him somewhere else because of her actions. So,
Was she doing something? Like, was she trying to come get him or something? Or, like, trying to kidnap him?
well, she's said that multiple times before, but,
Okay, well, like, when I asked Chad the other day, I was like, hey, where is JJ? And he said, for my security, he didn't want me to know, so is there a reason I should be in danger to know where he is?
no, it's nobody. It's his danger. It's the danger that there's people after me.
Okay.
So,
if you know, that puts you in a danger.
well, just in a bad position. And
Yeah, bad position.
everybody, if they don't know anything, then they don't have to say they know.
Right, so you're just worried. Okay.
I'm just to keep him protected and
Keep you protected.
keep everybody else protected.
I appreciate that. I was wondering why you told the police why he was with me.
I just needed to have somebody so I wouldn't have to tell them where he really was if they were going to tell Kay where he is.
Yeah, so do you think it's like your family? Or, like your family, your dad, or,
Well,
those
my
people?
family, well, not my whole family, but as you know, most of my family is working against me and
Yeah.
with her, basically.
Yeah. Is JJ safe?
He is safe and happy.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Are you afraid of anything? Like, are you afraid to tell me that you're just afraid that that I could be in danger? Like like I don't, like if I knew, like how could that hurt me? I don't understand how that could hurt me if I knew where he was.
Well, I'm just not telling anybody so that nobody has to say where he is or get questioned where he is so I can keep him as safe as possible.
Yeah. Okay, I hope that he's okay. I hope you guys are okay. I did have a question. I asked Al at one point, your brother, if I wanted to know, like where he was, and he said I did not want to know, and that he could not be found. So what does that mean?
Time out on your laptop.
Also, that nobody has to be worried about it. I mean, nobody has to be questioned about it so he can be safe.
Yeah, so how long are you going to be away for? Like, are you ever going to be able to come out and come back to society again? Or are you going to keep, come back? What does that look like?
I will do whatever the Lord needs me to do every day, so
I just wondered if I was ever going to see you again.
absolutely you will.
Okay, so maybe when they're done chasing you, you'll be able to come out of, maybe you'll come out again, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing for them to be working with Kay to find me. There's nothing that's gone on that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're working with her in some dark capacity. The police are working with her in some dark capacity. There's no reason for them to be after me in the first place.
Yeah, has she threatened you at all?
Yes, lots of times.
Oh boy, what did she say?
Well, it's in emails and everything.
So she said she was going to come take them, or she was?
There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Nellie.
Well, it sounds like it. I'm just worried for you guys
What did he have to do that? Did he hide?
He had to hide. He had to hide because they were so. Everybody's killing everybody in the society. Everybody was dying. They were killing all the natives.
And the scriptures had to hide in the cavity of a rock by day and go out by night.
The prophets did.
They did.
Yeah. Okay,
So
well, thank you for sharing that with me.
Scripture.
Okay, this scripture is just something that may be thoughtful for you. For behold, this is Doctrine and Covenants, section 3, verse 7 and 8. It says, For behold, you should not have feared man more than God. Although man set not the counsels of God and despised his words, yet you should have been faithful, and he would have extended his arm and supported you against all the fiery darts of the adversary. He would have been with you in every trouble. So when we work with the Lord and are obedient, He's going to protect us from adversarial darts and all kinds of negativity. But when we open the door to Satan, he comes in and then he attacks, and then he takes away to make it look like somebody else took it away. But that's not how God works. He doesn't work in darkness.
I agree with you 100%, and that's what the Lord is doing for me. Exactly what He's doing for me.
Oh, it just
We have not opened the door for darkness now. Darkness is knocking on the door all the time because that's the way dark works with the light. And I promise you that I have done nothing wrong in this case, but sometimes you have to hide in a cavity of a rock for your own life safety. And that's what the Lord requires of you sometimes. And that's how it is. And I'm sorry that's how it is, because there is a lot of darkness on the earth.
Yeah.
This been after me for zero reason besides the darkness of Kay, which you already know she's dark.
I haven't met her enough to know if she's dark or not. I've just met her slightly, and she seemed like a normal kind of person, but then I haven't engaged with her that much, so I don't know that personally.
So you don't know about her changing the thing for herself to be the beneficiary of the policy and all that stuff. None of that's dark, right?
Well, I haven't seen those documents, so I have no way of knowing.
You've seen them on my computer.
No, I have not. I haven't even looked in on your computer before. You don't show me
I don't
anything.
know why you're being controversial to me, or if you're recording this conversation for the police or whatever. I don't know what your intention is on this phone call.
Well,
but I love you with all my heart, and I have forever, and I will always love you.
I appreciate those words, but if you really loved me, you wouldn't have told the police that I had JJ with me. That's not what a friend does. I mean, that just makes it look weird, and it's not safe for me. That doesn't look good. I mean, you had to think of my welfare if you love me.
I do, and I did exactly what I felt the Lord was instructing me to do. And I appreciate you, and I love you. And I've never do anything to harm you. And you can have all of this confirmed to you by the Lord.
I have. And my conscience is clear. I feel very understanding what's really going on, Lori. And I believe that you have been very deceived by Satan. I believe that he has tricked you. And I don't believe that what you're doing is correct. I just don't. I mean, Tammy dies, and then your husband died, and then he's missing. It just doesn't sound like God's plan to me. It just sounds. It gives me a gut feeling. Like in my gut, it feels weird. It doesn't feel right. I don't have peace about it. I never have felt 100% peace about it. I always felt like a little weird in my stomach about all these things.
You know me, Mel. You know me. This does not sound like you. This sounds like you've been influenced by somebody dark who wants you to believe dark things and have fear of the celestial world.
I don't have fear.
You obviously do.
No, I have a peace of conscience, and I can see clearly.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I love you so much.
I know you do. I don't know what else to say.
Stand Christ when he comes again, and he's coming soon, and we will all stand there, and you will know at that point that he is supporting me and has supported me the whole time, and I have not been deceived.
I just want to testify that I know Tammy with the conspiracy theories. My sister-in-law's right behind it all, and I hope that you're not being influenced by that dark team.
I don't know who she is. I'm sorry, you said your sister-in-law? I don't even know her.
Oh, I know, but she's coming up with the same type of theories. And it's just not true. My own children were there. They testified that Tammy had been getting weaker and sick, and I begged her to go to the doctor. Her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart. She hates doctors, and she just passed away. That's how it happened. My son Garth was right there with me the whole time. My kids were at the house within 20 minutes of her passing. There were 2 coroners. They checked her out right there on the bed. All these conspiracy theories just make me sick to my stomach. Just absolutely sick. I know it's been told 3 years that Tammy would pass away at a young age. And I had no idea that Lori would even be a part of my life. I just knew that my life had 2 segments. And that I know Tammy's on a special mission and she's with my kids. She's visited them. There's so much, Melanie, that you just have to have faith. And this is not some sort of master plan. There's no way Lori and I should ever come up with this. It's just...
You can understand my concern, correct?
I can, from an outside perspective, but from
someone who knows as much as you know, no, not really. But we can feel Dave's influence on you. I can feel that, for sure.
He's a very good man, and he has a very strong foundation, that I know.
I know, but he seems to be the one that's putting the doubts in your mind.
You know what? I have come to understand that my gut feeling, I was not listening to it. And I always felt uncomfortable with many things.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry that I included you in those teachings then for your own sake, because I wish that you didn't have as much knowledge as you have, because you will be accountable for the knowledge that you do have, no?
So are you.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I have no fear.
Yeah.
I have no fear of that.
But I really, as I was reading the story of Korihor, and it's so very similar to this, you just can't see it, but he did it because he was trying to reclaim a people, and he thought at the very end, because of his carnal and natural desires, that's what influenced him. And he was very
Carnal natural desires?
well, honey, you got a lot of natural desires. We all know that.
That's what you think is me, Korihor? Are you kidding me right now?
I think both of you have similarities. It's in the scriptures. It's in the scriptures. And the scriptures are very powerful.
Yes, they are. I live by the scriptures, as you know.
I know, but we can rest the scriptures for our own vain glory.
I rested the scriptures?
We can do that, and I feel that you have. Our belief systems.
Do I rest the scriptures? Is that what you're accusing me of at this point?
I feel that you have.
Why do you feel that way? I need an explanation on this.
Because if you look, like the scripture just
Do you read the scriptures every single day? You know?
I know you read it. I don't doubt that. But the scripture right here says that you will be supported by all against the fiery darts of the adversary. You would have been supported if you had not opened dark portals and dark junk. You would have been safe if you would have obeyed God. He would have had your back. But you have been chased and tortured.
Whether you do this or not,
I'm sorry?
he has your back. So,
well, if he has your back, you would not be able to tell me where you are, and we couldn't find JJ. Like, where is he? I've been asking, where is he? And you know what I mean? Like,
I can tell everything where JJ is right now, and that would not be good, JJ. So, I'm sorry that you don't want me to protect my children, but I would never ask you to not protect your children.
Of course you wouldn't.
So, I can tell that you're just adversarial, Mel. I love you. I'm sorry that you feel this way.
Because I actually do care. I'm sharing what I feel for you because I know your salvation's in trouble for what you've done.
And my salvation is not in trouble at all. And I think you should check that with the Lord again.
Well, I felt a lot of things from the Lord. And this doesn't feel right.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, sweetheart. I'm sorry that you're friends with all those who are against me. Joseph Smith's friends turned against me.
I'm not friends with people that are against you.
Apparently you are.
I am not. I don't know Kay. I don't know who you're talking about. Your sister. I don't even know what her name or who she is. I don't know any of those people. Why did they contact me anyway? How would I even know about that?
Well, you're friends with Dave, and he apparently, you know.
Well, David is a very righteous man, and I've always known that grounding about him. And he has a lot of beautiful experiences with the Lord, and these are not the same. You know, when you get the priesthood, as Peter, James, and John shows up, and then he confirms all of those in the circle that are to get it, and everybody's a witness of that. Everybody's a witness that the pattern is in the scriptures. There's no witness that you ever receive what you think you received. Nobody has seen that but you. There's no witness. The witness, Joseph Smith, Oliver Calvary, Martin Harris, the 8 witnesses, they all showed up.
Is there a witness when Jesus, Heavenly Father, gave that to Joseph Smith by himself in the grove? Was there a witness?
No, but they had it later with other people. That was one experience, but others joined in later. When he brought other people into it, they had experiences.
Scriptures, yes or no?
I'm sorry?
Is that in the scriptures, yes or no?
That Joseph was alone when he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ?
Yes.
Yes, he was alone.
He was alone.
But he had to open it up first.
That's not a pattern at all.
Honey, what I'm saying is that after he saw that and other people joined in, they saw the things with him. He wasn't alone. There was a witness for them. There was no witness. Anybody's never seen what you've seen or experienced what you've seen. That's your own witness, but nobody said that.
No, God knows it, and I will never deny it. For my soul would be at stake if I did. So you can say it didn't happen to me, Mel, but if I say it, then I am accountable. You didn't witness it, but I did.
But your behaviors is not, okay, I understand that's what you believe you saw, but this is the thing, as I see, is that your behavior is not one of somebody that's in Christ. Your behavior. What?
Never had any idea that you would be the person of all people to turn me and cannot believe.
I'm asking questions, and I am concerned for you. That is what somebody does when they care.
You don't sound like you're concerned. You sound like you're accusatory. You do not sound concerned. You sound pissed off.
I'm not. I am troubled. Maybe that's the better word. Troubled. Because these things, like you being with Chad before he's even divorced, is unusual behavior for a person that's seen Jesus Christ.
I was never with him, and he was never divorced.
Honey, I've seen you guys together. So I haven't ever seen you with, I've never seen you with Chad kiss him and walk around the track at BYU with him. I never saw that. You
say you're the one that's feeling guilty about being with someone before they were divorced.
Oh, honey. I think that's not what we're talking about here.
Wait, it's not what we're talking about here. That's what I'm saying. You are going off the deep end.
Well, I'm just saying this is not a behavior of someone that sees Jesus Christ. It's not the behavior.
Really? Have you ever seen Jesus Christ? So do you know what the future behavior would be if you had seen Jesus Christ?
I know that when I pray.
Lord asks each of you every day, and He does protect me, and He is protecting me, and He will protect me against this accusation as well. And we will both stand there with Him, and you tell me if I was lying or not, but we're both standing there with Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And that's the end of the audio, Your Honor.
All right. Having heard the published audio then out of Exhibit 42, this would be a good time for us to take our mid-morning break. So we will take about a 20-minute recess and return for further testimony after that.
All rise, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. We'll have the jurors brought back in.
All right, please. Here's our present counsel.
All right. Thank you. Please be seated. We're back on the record on case CR 2221-1624. We've got a witness, Ms. Gibb, who is testifying, however, not present in the witness box. Is the witness here?
She is, Your Honor. Is the court ready for her to be brought in? I believe she's just in a room outside.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Ms. Gibb, I'll remind you, you're still under oath for your testimony. Ms. Blake, you can continue the direct examination.
Turn on my speaker. Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Gibb, we just heard a recording that was made by you on December 8th of 2019. Could you clearly hear that?
Yes.
Do you recall why you made that recording?
I made it for several reasons. At first, I was trying to inquire the whereabouts of JJ for his safety. I also wanted to, record her explaining how I didn't know anything about the whereabouts of JJ and any other information I could learn, like where they were. Those, just those kinds of inquiries.
And why had you become concerned about the whereabouts of JJ?
Because they initially told me that he was safe with Kay, and then the police are now involved and questioning where JJ is, and she says, and Chad says that Kay doesn't have them, and so that started to bring some questions to me, like what's really going on, but just not sure. And some just, thoughts with Alex, talking to him and trying to get more clarification.
And circling back, you indicated the last time you saw JJ would have been the night of September 22nd.
Correct.
And you stayed at Lori's residence that night, is that correct?
That's correct.
What room did you stay in?
So she let me sleep in Tylee's room, and then David slept in JJ's room, but I would often go back and forth. And so that night I remember just being in David's room, which was in JJ's JJ's room. That's what I recall.
So you were in that room with David for most of the night?
I believe so.
Do you recall if David had any kind of an issue that night, health issues or otherwise?
Yeah, he woke up very troubled from a dream that he had, and he just was in a really very heavy, just really felt his heart was racing. He was very kind of scared by the dream.
Did you do anything at that point?
I did. I got my cell phone and I text I think I did both. I called Lori, called Chad to see if they could maybe give him a blessing. I went to her door and knocked, or I don't know if I knocked on it, but I tried to open her door and it was locked. So I went back to the room.
Did she respond to your call or your text?
No.
Did Chad respond to any attempts to reach him?
No.
And that was the night of September 22nd?
Correct.
And that's the last night you saw JJ?
That's correct.
And just to clarify, you ended up leaving the next day. Do you recall what time of day you left?
Yeah, I would say somewhere after 8 in the morning.
And you did not see JJ on the next morning?
I do not recall seeing him.
And then in November, you get the call about saying JJ's with you.
Correct.
And at that time, you learn he's not with Kay.
That's correct.
Did Lori ever tell you where he was?
No.
When you made that call on December 8th and you heard the audio, there's a few things in there that I wanted to go over with you.
Okay.
A comment is made that for someone who knows as much as you, that Lori can't believe that you're asking these questions, essentially.
Yes.
Do you know what she meant by that? Or what did you take it to mean?
Yes, I took it to mean that all the things that she had learned about multiple lives, multiple probations, all her teachings, all the teachings of Chad and her. Oh, sorry. And multiple probations about people being light, people being dark, those teachings, that's what she was referring to, and that's how I understood it to be.
And when you say those teachings, whose teachings were they?
I think they originated from Chad.
Did Lori also participate in teaching those things?
She did.
And we've talked about what religion you're part of.
Correct.
Are those the same teachings that are generally taught in the LDS faith?
Absolutely not.
And there's also a comment made that you're going to be accountable for the knowledge you do have.
Right.
What did you take that to mean?
All the teachings that she taught, she felt that I would be accountable for all that she shared with me.
And do you know, what did you take it to mean as far as who you would be accountable to?
God.
And there's another comment in there, and I think you say to her something along the lines of, for someone that has seen Jesus Christ or that sees Jesus Christ. Do you recall making that comment?
I do.
Why did you make that comment?
Her character, from my understanding of Christ, is when she was having her relationships with Chad and some deception and lying that was going on at times, and just her behaviors, being with him and also being married, that did not, to me, represent someone that would know Christ at that level.
And when you say at that level, had Lori indicated that she had seen Jesus?
She did.
What did she indicate regarding that?
She shared with me when she first met me that she had seen him in the temple and that he appeared to her.
And as part of the LDS faith, do people sometimes say they've had revelations?
People say they have revelations, yes.
And would that be part of the regular teachings of the church?
Yes.
And if someone has revelations, do others sometimes turn to them for guidance or advice?
People that have authority to do that, yes.
So if Lori was seeing Jesus, would that potentially lead people to turn to her for advice?
No, I don't believe so.
Previously, we talked a little bit about some castings. Do you know who organized the castings that you participated in?
Lori.
Were there any assignments given during those castings?
I think she tried to talk to them about, what they could potentially say during that time. Yeah.
And when you say she, was that Lori?
Lori, yes.
And we also talked about the light and dark scale.
Yes.
And I believe you indicated when asked about Tammy that maybe Tammy became dark close to the time of her death.
Correct.
Do you recall learning of Tammy Daybell's passing?
I do.
Do you recall what date that was?
I believe it was in October, but I don't remember the date.
Do you recall if you learned of it the day that she passed?
I believe it was the day after she passed, through a friend who sent a text to me to show me a little memo that she got from Facebook from Chad's account. And then a random friend, sent it to me and said, look, what happened? That's how I learned of it.
And when we talk about the day after, could it have been the day that it was announced or that it was reported?
The day that it was reported, yes.
Did you reach out to Lori at that time?
I did.
How did you reach out to her?
I called her on her phone.
Do you recall if you also texted her?
I don't remember.
When you talked to her on the phone, do you recall what time of day that was?
It was in the morning.
The early morning, mid-morning, if you recall?
It felt like it was closer to mid-morning.
Did she tell you about the passing or did you tell her?
I told her and then asked her more about it.
Did she seem to have already known about it when you talked to her?
She seemed that she knew something was going on. She said that two of the girls from the group of women that we've discussed earlier had called her and inquired about that.
Did you ask her any questions about it?
I did.
What did she tell you?
I first asked her, I said, did you know that Tammy died? And then I believe I don't know how she indicated, but because of the conversation she had with the two other ladies, that she knew about it through them. And I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I asked it pretty broad, so I'll narrow it down. Did she tell you anything about what she knew regarding Tammy's passing?
So I asked her what happened to Tammy, and she says that she had a dark entity in her, and they had to do what they could to get that spirit out of her.
And when she said they did what they had to do, did you know who she was referring to?
Her and Chad.
Do you recall if she indicated anything regarding Tammy's knowledge of an affair or suspicion of an affair?
She said she was starting to get suspicious.
And by she was starting to get suspicious, was that Tammy?
Correct.
Did Lori indicate how she knew that?
I recall a conversation she had with me about Charles knew Tammy, by phone or something, like there was some connection between their conversations, and maybe another girl. I think it was Christina understood that there was something wrong going on earlier on, and she might have shared some information. I don't know. It was a little bit of information Lori had shared with me. That's all I would have known is from her, but I think that's where it came from.
Do you recall if Lori indicated how long Tammy had been suspicious of that before she passed away?
I would say no longer than 2 weeks.
Do you recall if Lori indicated how long Tammy had been possessed or dark before she passed away?
maybe, it wasn't more than 2 weeks, so it could have been less than 2 weeks, but it was a short period of time.
So Tammy becoming dark or possessed and her getting suspicious of the affair, to the best of your knowledge, happened around the same time?
About the fair part, I'm not sure, but the dark part is yes.
About 2 weeks before.
Correct.
Did Lori ever, I'll back that up, Charles is killed on July 11th of 2019, is that correct?
Correct.
Tammy is alive until October 19th of 2019, or about that time.
Correct.
In the meantime, while Charles has passed away and Tammy's still alive, did Lori ever indicate anything to you regarding her relationship with Chad or any frustration?
Yes, she was eager to move to Idaho to be with him. She was frustrated that Tammy had not passed on yet. She kept being told by her own personal revelation that she was supposed to pass away, according to Chad's as well, that she was supposed to pass away by now. I remember one time they said she was supposed to get in a car accident, but she never did. So she was feeling some frustration about being there while he was still married to her.
All right. We'll pause the proceedings for a minute. We've got a phone that went off, so we'll have the marshal take that. Thank you. Apologies. You can continue, Ms. Blake. Thank you.
Thank you. When you talked to Lori after Tammy had passed away, did she indicate how she was feeling?
Sorry, my mind's drifting a little bit. She was very happy to move on and get married to Chad. She was very excited about being married to him and being with him.
Do you recall her expressing any sorrow or sadness?
No.
Was it similar to the demeanor you'd observed shortly after Charles had died?
Yes.
And we talked about some of these teachings of Chad and Lori's, and we've talked about the light and dark scale. Do you also recall anything being taught to you or told you regarding a trust scale?
A little bit. I don't remember the words trust scale. Might have been another word, but yeah, that she had percentages on stuff like, yeah, some percentages, and I can't remember all the words, like if they're trusting or other words that would indicate their loyalty to them, or maybe where they were spiritually.
And when you say she had some scales, who is she?
Lori.
Do you recall ever being told anything about vibrations?
Yes.
And who told you about the vibrations?
Lori told me.
What do you recall her telling you about vibrations?
And that vibrations had to do with what level of spirituality you're at. So, for example, if you're at, I think, 1,000 vibrations, you were more in a higher spiritual level. They call it more terrestrial level.
And when you're in these different levels, do you know what the vibrations were leading to as your vibrations increased?
They were leading to more the body being translated, and yeah, mostly that is your body being translated and changed.
And do you recall who had talked to you about the vibrations and the translations?
Lori.
Do you recall what you were told regarding if while someone was becoming translated, what changes they would go through?
Sometimes she would say she didn't have to eat necessarily. She didn't. She would get younger. Maybe her menstrual cycle would not be changed and things like that.
So it could include physical changes.
Correct.
Would it be safe to say that these changes would take someone beyond the normal mortal body that we're given?
Yeah, higher level of, yeah.
Did Lori ever indicate if she had her own visions?
She was not one to claim so much of as a visionary. I think she said she would have a dream here or there.
Would she talk to you about what those dreams were?
Yes,
And was that similar to the dream she'd had regarding Charles dying?
correct.
So did Lori believe that these dreams would actually come true?
She indicated she believed it.
Were these things also taught to Alex Cox?
Yes,
Did you ever have conversations with Alex Cox?
I did.
What was your understanding, or what did he tell you regarding his belief in what they were teaching?
He gradually began to learn about it. Not in the beginning, but near, more closer to the end of my relationship with them. And he really did believe that these entities were zombies now, or the people that they were hoping would pass away. He indicated that he believed they really were zombies.
And when you talk about the people they were hoping would pass away, who is they?
Charles, Tylee, JJ, Tammy,
And who was hoping they would pass away?
Chad and Lori.
And you say Alex initially wasn't taught some of these things. Do you know the reason why?
He just wasn't, around the conversations in the beginning. Just he was kind of popping in and out of her house, and so it just wasn't disclosed in the beginning.
But he believed in what Chad and Lori were teaching him.
He did.
And he truly, to the best of your understanding, he believed that people could become zombies.
I asked him if I told him I didn't 100% believe it was true, and he said he 100% believed it.
And in that recording from December 8th, you talk about a conversation you had with Alex.
Correct.
And I believe you said you asked him if you wanted to know what happened to JJ.
Yeah.
And what was his response?
He says, you don't want to know.
And when you visited Lori in September, is that when she told you JJ was a zombie?
Yes.
Was Alex Cox there?
Yes.
If I can have just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Who will be conducting cross-examination?
I will, Judge.
All right, Mr. Thomas, you can commence with your cross-examination. As we get started here, Mr. Thomas, I'll remind you and the witness both, please, to not talk at the same time in the cross-examination so we can keep the record straight. And
Right.
with that
Thank
in
you,
mind,
Judge.
you can inquire.
Ms. Gibb, you've met with the prosecution on several occasions over the last couple of years, right?
Correct.
Okay. When was the last time you met with them?
A few years ago, I don't remember. A few years ago.
So you didn't meet with them in preparation for this trial today?
Not physically.
What does that mean?
I didn't meet face to face with them. I met on Zoom, but I was thinking about when I met with the officers down there. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't thinking of just the interactions I had with Lindsay on Zoom. I was just thinking about an interaction I had physically with them.
What was the last interaction you had with either Ms. Blake or one of the other prosecutors?
It was trying to remember what month it was. Was it end of March, beginning of April, I believe?
So this month?
It could have been the very end of last month.
Okay. And did you go over your testimony with them?
Yes.
Okay. And prior to that, when was the time before that you met with the prosecution?
It felt like it was back in Chandler, a year or two. I don't remember how long it's been now. It's been a while.
Okay. When you went over this with, you said Ms. Blake, is that right?
Correct.
When you went over your testimony with her, were you as forgetful as you've been today?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall writing a 7-page, I guess I would say outline, and sending that to Rob Wood?
I remember sending it to a few people. Most likely I did.
Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to go over that?
No.
No. You sent it back in July of 2020 and haven't looked at it since then?
Oh, I might have looked at it during that month or two, but I haven't looked at it in a long time. I don't know where it is. I can't find it, so I don't know where it is.
Did you ask the prosecutors for a copy of it? Because they gave me a copy of it.
I asked Lindsay if they had some things that I'd share with Rob, like remembering points to help me remember different events, and I didn't receive it.
Okay, but you asked for it?
I might have gotten an email, but I don't believe they were attached to it. I could be wrong, but I'm not recalling it.
Okay.
But I did get some things from her.
Your Honor, I know what the court's probably going to do on this, but I'm going to ask the court to strike this witness's testimony based on Idaho Criminal Rule 16b-6. The state has had...
Your Honor, I would ask for a sidebar.
All right. All right, there's an objection that's going to be argued. We've determined it would be more appropriate to argue this outside of the presence of the jurors. So if all would please rise, we'll have the jurors excused to the jury room while this issue is sorted out.
All right.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Mr. Thomas, you lodged an objection. Why don't you indicate again the nature of your objection? I'll allow further response from the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense objects to the witness's testimony based on Idaho Criminal Rule 16, parens B, parens 6, which regards state witnesses. I'd like to read the rule just on the record, just so for appellate purposes. Is that okay with the court?
Yes.
Says, parens 6 says, state's witnesses, on written request of the defendant, the prosecuting attorney must furnish to the defendant a written list of the names and addresses of all persons having knowledge of relevant facts who may be called by the state as witnesses at the trial, together with any record of prior felony convictions of any of them that is within the knowledge of the prosecuting attorney, And then this is the pertinent part, Your Honor. The prosecuting attorney must also furnish, on written request, the statements made by the prosecution witnesses or prospective prosecution witnesses to the prosecuting attorney or the prosecuting attorney's agents or to any official involved in the investigation of the case unless a protective order is issued as provided in subsection 1 of this rule. It is my argument that the state received statements from Ms. Gibb that she just testified to, and she indicated that she met with the prosecutor, and the prosecutor did not turn over those statements.
Are you talking about oral statements or the written 7-page outline she referred to?
Oral statements, we received the 7-page outline. The oral statements I'm referring to are the statements made to Ms. Blake over Zoom or anything else that she's discussed with the prosecution.
All right, what's the response to this objection from the state?
Your Honor, I think we've previously litigated this, and I understand counsel's desire to preserve the issue, but moving forward, the state would request any of these arguments be heard outside the presence of the jury. That being said, I also have that rule pulled up, and I think there's simply a different interpretation being applied by defense than is intended by the rule. The rule does indicate that all statements of a prosecution witness or prospective witness known to the state have to be turned over. I do not think that rule contemplates somebody saying hi or something unrelated to the case being turned over. All statements have already been turned over. The state and the defense are allowed to meet with witnesses. They are allowed to do witness prep. If any new statements or new information is learned, I agree that rule requires those to be turned over. In this case, there was nothing new learned. All of the statements made, the testimony here today, are information that is well within the defense's possession. It has been turned over in discovery. The 7-page outline referenced by defense counsel, copies of prior testimony, transcripts of prior testimony, and police reports have all been turned over to the defense, which contain the information. There was nothing new learned, no new information obtained, no new statements made, which would require disclosure under Idaho Criminal Rule 16. So the state's position is we have absolutely complied with the discovery request, and the defense's attempt to broaden that requirement is simply not within the purview of the statute or the intent of the statute. So we would ask that defense's motion be denied.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. If you'll give me just a moment, I'm reviewing some authority here. And Mr. Thomas, do you have any rebuttal argument after the state's argument there?
No, Your Honor.
All right. The court's reviewed the objection that's been made under Rule 16. It's a long rule. B6, and considered some authority that governs that as well. The first issue is a practical concern I would have is the timeliness of this objection. If you're asking me to strike the witness, was that your request, strike the witness or the witness's prior testimony here?
The witness is prior testimony.
Okay, so you're asking me to tell the jury to disregard everything they've heard all day today?
Well, Your Honor, unfortunately I made this objection yesterday or 2 days ago, and the court shot me down, and so I thought the only appropriate time to make this objection would be when I was here on cross-exam.
Okay. I would find that impractical for purposes of this witness, obviously, with the jury having already heard the significant amount of the entire direct examination of the state. But further, looking at the rule itself, the rule does not preclude the state or the defense from meeting with witnesses who may be testifying at trial and preparing with them for testimony. I think the rule contemplates the issue I brought up with the the 7-page outline someone has now, that would be a different story if you had not been supplied that and the state had that in its custody and was not turned over. I'd see that differently, but there's been a record made that you did get that. In terms of what the rule allows, it's to make sure that parties know who's going to testify, how to locate them, and any statements they may have made, such as statements made to police, witness statements that often come up in cases, those types of statements. And so looking at some case law, also State versus Montgomery, 163 Idaho 40, I think that the objection at this point is unfounded as it relates to this witness, and I will deny the motion to strike the testimony for both the practical consideration that she's already testified on direct, as well as under Rule 16b-6. I just don't find that applies given the circumstances here. So that'll be the court's ruling as it relates to this witness. And then going forward, Mr. Thomas, again, if you want to maintain the record, I understand that, and you can lodge the objection. Unless there's some written, previously provided statements, I would likely be ruling the same way, so we'll just take those up with each witness if you think the matter needs to be raised. That'll be the court's ruling then on the objection, and we'll have the jurors return to the courtroom so you can continue your cross-examination.
Prior to that, may I just get that citation, Judge?
Yes, it was State versus Montgomery, 163 Idaho 40, and that's a 2017 Idaho case.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome. All right, we'll have the jurors brought back.
And just to not be disruptive, the next time a witness comes in, should I make the objection before the state calls or asks their first question, or how do you want me to do that?
That probably is more effective
Okay.
in terms of making your objection if you want to continue to lodge it.
Very good, Your Honor. Thank you.
You're welcome.